How's it going, GDC? I hope you're all doing really well. So, my name is Harvey Newman, and I'm an animation director on an up-and-coming company called Build a Rocket Boy. Now, we are based here in Edinburgh, beautiful city, beautiful place to live, and we're having a lot of fun working on something a bit secret behind closed doors, but should be a lot of fun once it comes out. Now, I've been around for a while working in the industry. I worked in companies like DICE previous to this. Also worked in Creative Assembly, I worked in Lionhead, Crytek, and a few others. And I've been in the industry for a good 18 years and about 15 years animating professionally. So I've learned a lot throughout my journey here. And this industry is full of talented people. I am loving my time. Still, 15 years later, I'm still loving my time in the industry. And there's a lot to be thankful for, right? So I have learned a few things throughout my journey here. And I thought, since this is my first GDC talk, I think it's best to basically do a talk that encapsulates more or less what I've seen throughout the years in about a 30 minutes to 45 minutes talk in the best way I can. I feel like through my journey, having students and teaching animation through the years, one of the things that is very clear to me is that up-and-coming animation students that want to get into games and want to animate, they don't really have an idea of what it is like to work in the industry. And then the same thing goes for somebody that's just getting started in the industry. They don't know where they're going and what kind of experience awaits for them when they get to be a senior or a lead. So I would like to share my experience with all of you. Some examples in Maya as well, obviously, but most of all is going to be something that I'm going to be telling you some of the experiences that I have, how I solve them, and how perhaps it might help you throughout your career. Now, animation is one of the hardest art forms that you can actually learn out there. And the reason why is because it takes a long time for you to master animation. Just the 12 principles is really hard. And then for you to apply those creatively is even harder. So what happens is that you spend quite a few years working on your craft, working on wanting to be an animator, and you spend years doing it, and you finally mastered it, and you finally are after the hump that you can now apply the 12 principles, but now you can do it in a creative way, right? So you showcase your talent to the world with your showreel, only to find out that perhaps most of the companies that you send to say no. So that might take you another few years, if you're anything like me, to get into the industry. So then you start in the industry and you face all these realities and you kind of wish someone had told you, right? And this is exactly what I'm trying to do with this talk. Trying to tell you a little bit of the things that I have seen, and hopefully you guys will be ready for when those things happen to you. So this talk is made for everybody in the industry that wants to be a gameplay animator or just an animator in general, right? I'm going to split this talk into 3 sections. The first section is going to be for all those that want to get in the industry. The second section is going to be all about you getting into the industry and then just getting started, right? Just like, getting your feet wet a little bit. And the third section is going to be for all the veterans out there, people that have been working in the industry, have a few years under their belt, and some of the things that I've learned that makes the job a little bit better every single day. So let me get started with this talk. Now, for all those wanting to get into the games industry, I think the very first tip that I can give you is that comfort is a trap. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when I was actually learning animation, I found that I felt like I wanted to constantly reward myself for things that I was doing because I was working so hard, right? So back in the day, I was working a 9-to-5 job, and I had to find time after the 9-to-5 job in order to actually do my animations. So then it would be like another, 5-8 hours of animation, which would take me until like early night, early hours of the morning. And then I will go to sleep for a few hours and start over again. Now, that is not the most healthiest way of you learning animation, but it's common amongst animators that you need to work a little extra hard and kind of just like give up some of your personal time in order for you to work on your animations. So this is why I'm saying comfort can be a trap, because a lot of animators out there, or want to be animators out there, never get to be animators because they feel like the fight between working hard and being comfortable, sometimes comfort always wins. And if that's the case, it means that you probably never will get to achieve your dream, right? Because working in the industry as a professional is going to be equally as hard, if not harder, than those times that you had to work a little extra, right? And that is basically the idea of why comfort can be a trap. Second tip, read and be inspired. So this is going to contradict a little bit of like the first topic, but you have to learn how to step away from your computer and actually be inspired by things outside of animation. Because what happens as well is that you can be consumed by animation too much. It certainly has happened to me. And it was really, really bad because you have animation blindness after a while. You stop seeing what's good and what's bad. And then the more you work on it, the more you're destroying your animation. So it kind of just goes into a peak of like, this is the most epic animation it can be. And then you get animation blindness, and then you start seeing how good it is because you think that you have to continuously overwork it, and it starts to be detrimental to the animation. So then you actually are destroying your work without you even knowing. This is why it's so important for you to step away from your computer, be with friends, be inspired, read some books, and just get knowledge from outside sources that are not just you sitting in Maya, animating, and getting the knowledge hands-on. So a few showreel tips, after seeing so many showreels back to back. First thing that I have to say is that you need to make your showreel entertaining. Because what happens is, people like myself that are looking at showreels so often will see the same showreel all the time. And by that I mean that, you know, those kind of rules or like certain things that you need to do in a showreel lists that show up everywhere, but you have to have an acting shot, you have to have a creature shot, you need to have a facial shot, you need to have a bouncing ball or a running cycle or walk cycle, all of those things. That is basically looking at the same showreel over and over and over again. Now, myself, like many other animators, we like to be entertained, right? And animation should be entertaining more than looking at something over and over and over. So if you manage to make your showreel stand out by making it entertaining, tell a story with your showreel, it will mean that that one showreel will stand out from hundreds of showreels out there. And it will also mean that the person that is looking at a lot of showreels back to back to back will see yours and will be like, this is interesting. Let me watch that again slowly and see what I liked about it. And it's only at that point that you get into the section of like, I would like to speak with this person to find out more about this person and what makes them tick. Only at that point you get an interview, right? And that's what you want. You want to get an interview. So make sure you make your showreels as entertaining as possible. Now, another tip for you for your showreels is that if you want to get into games, make sure your showreel is games focused, right? Gone are the days that you could send one showreel. It could apply for VFX, film, games, and TV. Those days are gone. Those were my days, very long time ago. Now, games are basically spoiled for choice, right? When I started, games were seen as almost like a secondary tier to what films and VFX were, right? It was almost like if you didn't make it to films, if you didn't make it to VFX, then maybe you can make it into games. Nowadays, it's almost flipped, right? Games are so huge, so big, that everybody wants to work in games, I feel, at least. So you have to make your showreels ready and specific to games. And more than that, if you want to get into a specific studio, if you have a dream studio that you want to get into, then make sure that your showreel is not only game specific, but also specific to a specific style of the studio, right? So for example, studios, there's certain studios out there, they only do creature animation for games, right? There's other studios out there, they only do first person animations for games. Other studios do third person only for games. And even within those sections, there's also specific things that you can do in order to make it showcase and represent the style of the studio. Now, there's a lot of things that you can say with your short reel without having to use words. And one of the things that you can say to a studio is like, here's my short reel. It's very specific to your studio. Look at what I've done that can complement the work that you guys are doing in your other games. Now, this is great for you because what it means is that somebody can look at your short reel and be like, this guy, this girl, she can actually slot perfectly into this specific role that we have for a junior animator or intermediate animator or somebody that actually can do something specific. That is great because you're giving people a reason for them to hire you on top of having a kick-ass short reel. Now, last tip for everybody that wants to get into the industry is try to get an internship if you can, because an internship sometimes doesn't really require a short reel. Maybe it requires for you to be in the right university with the right connections. Sometimes it does require a short reel for you to get in, but most importantly, an internship will give you an overview of what it is to work in the games industry. And that is incredibly important because what the games industry looks and sounds like from outside is completely different than when you are inside the industry. So you can only know truly if you want to work in the industry for the longest time if you can have a preview of what the industry looks like inside. So if you're lucky enough to have an internship, it's great. And if you do it, don't be the passive person that just sits at their desk and they do what they are told and that's about it. They don't ask questions. They just sit there, do the animations, go home, because you're not really learning much that way. When you are actively in your internship, make sure that you actually do your animations, do what you're told, but then on the time that you have off, on your breaks and like the time that you can actually spare, actively seek for guidance from others or ask questions of others. If there's a specific role that you want to be in the future, like for example, an intermediate role or a junior role, then speak with the junior animator and ask them, how are you finding it? How is things? What kind of work are you doing? What kind of jobs have you had to do to get to this point? And then speak with the animator that is above him, right? The intermediate animator. How do you do? What kind of things do you do? What kind of responsibilities do you have? And just see how they work. Maybe ask them about the workflows. Because the more you absorb in your internship, the more fulfilled you're going to be as an animator in the future. Because you'll know exactly what to expect. And even if that company doesn't hire you, you at least will have a glimpse of what it is to work in any company. And then you can apply those learnings, those teachings, those things that you've learned later on in your career as you get started somewhere else, wherever you decide to go. Congratulations, you made it to the industry. Now you're working in games as you always wanted, and you love it. It's great, it's the company that you wanted, it's beautiful, right? Now, very first thing that I'd like to say is that there's a big difference between mocap and hand key in the industry. So there's a few things that you need to do in order to find your space within games, right? So if you start in a studio that is heavy on mocap can be very difficult for you to clean up in the beginning because even though it seems easy that you just have to clean up the motion and the emotion already exists, it's not as easy as it seems. It will take you only a few months to get to this, but there is such a thing as cleaning the data too much and destroying the data because of it, right? Everything becomes mushy and it starts losing that human feel that the actors did on the volume, on the mocap studio. So there's a certain art to cleaning mocap so you can enhance it, but it still feels like mocap. It still feels realistic. So a good studio for this is Naughty Dog. They do this in a beautiful way. And there's other studios out there that do exactly the same. So you can enhance the mocap to make it more entertaining, but still leave that weight, that natural motion that doesn't feel odd, feels just right, right? So that is what I have to say about mocap. If you have it, learn it. It's an incredibly useful skill for you as an animator in the games industry. Now, when it comes to hand key, once again, only a few studios out there do hand key animations for games, but the ones they do, that requires more time because everything needs to be created from nothing, from zero. So hand key animation takes more time, and this is why mocap is so widely used in games, because the turnaround is faster. Now, hand key is beautiful, I love it, it's great, but once again, once you're actually animating it for games, it's very different, because you cannot make just one scene full of different movements in Maya and work at it together. You need to do it separately. So for you to understand how to chop that animation up into different pieces, or actually create it individually as different pieces and then put it together, that stuff is going to be very difficult to get your head around, coming from not working within an engine, just working for yourself in your showreel. So make sure that you ask questions a lot in the beginning. As you are a junior, as you are in an internship, ask questions all the time about why do you do certain things in a certain way. When you are a junior, when you're just getting started, that's the perfect time for you to ask as many questions as you possibly can, because that's what you're there for. As a junior animator, people need to take a little extra time with you, because that's what you're there for, to learn. So ask as many questions as you can, absorb as many things as you can, so you can become the best animator possible in the shortest amount of time. And here's something else that I have to say to everybody getting started. There's different types of studios, and the studios will use their animators in a different way, right? Like pretty much every single studio uses their animators slightly different, right? So why am I saying this? Because depending on the studio, you might end up doing different things as an animator, right? So to me, at least based on my experience, there's 3 types of studios out there. They use the animators in 3 different types of ways, generically. One of them is basically the studio that just wants the animators to animate. So you get hired, you sit on your chair, and you just animate. When you get your animations to look correctly within the parameters that the studio set, you send it to somebody, normally a technical animator, and they implement the animation for you. That is basically how you are animating in a studio that just wants animators to animate. That's it. Now, there's other types of studios that actually have animators doing everything. And by everything, I mean you animate, and you also do the implementation, and you're also doing debugging, meaning like finding bugs or finding solutions for your problems if you need to. So there's many studios out there that do this. Depends on the engine that you have, and I've worked in a few, but that requires you to have more of a technical mind instead of just artistical mind. Once again, it helps you as an animator to actually be in both studios, because unless you implement your own animations, you don't really see the full circle and how awesome it is to work in the games industry. Once you see your animations working in game, implemented by you, and when you press a button, something happens because you implemented it that way, that stuff is magic. It's really, really cool. So make sure you work in a studio like that. However, there is a lot of studios out there that are very heavy on the technical and less so on the animation. That is also bad, because you spend most of your time within the engine and not so much time animating, right? It depends on what engine you're working on, the tooling that exists, the support that you have, all that stuff. But just know that there is these 2 types of studios, right? One is very heavy on technical, another one is very heavy on just the art form of animation. Now, I believe there's a third one, and I believe that this third one is going to be the future of games. I hope I'm right. And I think there is a perfect balance between animation and implementation, where the animation can shine through and you spend most of your time animating, but you also do a bit of implementation as well, because you need to see your animations implemented in game. However, you don't spend all of your time in engine trying to debug animations, right? Now, if your animations have a problem, you definitely should spend time analyzing, speaking with people, other departments. But the role is for you to kind of like complement animation systems that exist there before, instead of creating animation systems from scratch. And if you know about animation systems, it's basically like what happens when a character walks and shoots, right? That is an animation system. Now, the animator can come through and add implementations or variations of the animation in order to make it better, more fluid, right? And just add variants and add to that system. But the creation of the system is based off a work of a technical animator, and those are the people that are technically minded a lot and less so artistic, right? So I think that's the third element. And I see a lot of studios working it this way. Our studios working that way. And I feel like animators are happier when they can actually do both animation and a little bit of technical. And I think that's basically the sweet spot or where you need to be as a studio. Now, this is a big one. Thinking systematically. Games animation is based on systems, animation systems. So when you start animation, you're just kind of like sitting down and trying to get animation to look as good as possible, right? You're not really thinking about how to implement it in game and how does this all gonna work out. Now you are in the industry and you are working, right? So you need to start thinking about how do these systems work together, right? So if I'm working on the locomotion system, how does this entwines, connects with the shooting system, right? How do they work together? When you start asking questions of your technical animators or your more technical animators, then you'll realize that all of it is connected by an engine and it's all very beautiful and nice. When you begin implementing animations, you will start thinking about it in a systemic way. And that is key for you to become then later a lead director if you want to, because you need to understand what's under the hood in order for you to be able to make the game the best it can be. So the more you understand what's going on under the hood, the better animations you can deliver for the animation systems that are currently in place. I hope that makes sense. So this is why it's so important for you to actually think systematically. And last but not least, for everybody that is getting started in this industry, try to forget as much as possible about the imposter syndrome. And this happens at all levels. Even at my level as director, you still have imposter syndrome. Doesn't matter where you go. But just know that this fear of not knowing as much as people think you know, this is always present. And you have to learn to live with it. And the best way I found how, and this is why I try to actually not be afraid of this feeling, is because there's always going to be people out there that know more than you. And instead of being afraid of them or their knowledge or like somebody knowing more than you should embrace it, because it means that there's always room for you to grow. And that is a happy thought for me. It didn't used to be, but right now is a happy thought, because as long as there's people out there that know more than me, I can ask them questions and I can find out how they do it so well, so I can then implement it within myself, so I can hopefully do it as good as they do, right? So this is why imposter syndrome is not necessarily a bad thing unless you tangle it with ego. That's when it becomes a big thing, right? Because all of a sudden it's all about who is better, or like why does he think he's better than me, or anything of that sort. That is detrimental for your career, for your artistic career, for your growth, right? So forget about that. Don't be afraid of imposter syndrome. Just know that it happens to every single person around you. Everyone has this. Even the people that know or look like they got it together, those are normally the ones that have a bigger one than everybody else. So know this and be cool with it. Now, finally, let's talk about the people that have been here for a while. People like myself that have been in this industry for a long time, and they just want a few tips on how maybe certain other people do things. I would like to share mine. Hopefully you guys will want to share with yours. Make sure to leave a comment if you can, or share your thoughts somewhere to find out if some of this resonates with you guys. Now, after a while, when you are in this industry, there is a lot of people out there that kind of just come in fresh, positive and all that. They get chewed on, spit out, and they're very much like negative, or they like to actually drag others down, or they just don't have anything good to say, or they just look at the job as a job and that's it, nothing else, or they're just miserable for whatever reason, right? That is very common. And even I suffered from that for a while. like especially after you start, because you start to see that there is a certain type, depending on the studio that you are, depending on the people that you're surrounded with. You start to feel very much dragged down. You start to feel like negative, and then if you are negative to other people that are negative, maybe you can get away with some more things. This is a whole thing, right? Now, I feel like positivity in the industry is kind of rare, I feel. And I also feel like if you are positive towards others, it might not have such a big impact as being negative, but it has a much more lasting impact. Other people will gravitate towards you. Now, the industry is really, really small. It might look huge from outside, but inside is incredibly small. Everyone knows each other, or you know somebody that works in another studio. And then after a few years, you kind of know that, have friends a bit everywhere, right? So here's a quote by Maya Angelou, that a black poet from America, that I really, really like. And I take with me all the time because this is important for you guys to know in order for you to kind of like change your mentality and how you deal with other people in the industry. And the quote goes something like this: people will forget what you told them, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And this is very important because when you are under pressure in a game, it feels like everything is on fire. It feels like it's the very most important thing in the whole world. And this is a life or death situation. When people are enclosed in an office with that mentality, then it becomes all about, sometimes, not all the time, becomes all about like, why did you make a mistake? Pointing fingers, right? Like, you shouldn't have done it like that. You should have known better. You know this for this long. So that kind of stuff happens a lot. If it does happen to you, don't take it personally, because what happens is those things are temporary, and on the long run, that is not going to matter. What matters is you being professional about your work, you delivering the goods at all times, being really good at your craft and knowing that you're good at your craft, and then just be positive and be human with each other, Funny thing is, everyone that actually recommends each other in this games industry, right? Like because the industry is so small, if you know somebody that works in another company and they apply into your company, one of the first things they will say is like, Harvey, do you know this person? Yes? Cool. What do you think? And depending on the positive or negative, this person has a higher likelihood of being hired or not, right? To me, at least, the people that have the most impact are normally the ones that made me feel a certain way, right? So a good mate, somebody that helped me out through tough times, somebody that knew more and had the time to actually kind of like sit with me and teach me how to do certain things. Those people are the people that I cherish, and the people that I'll be like, this guy, this girl, definitely, like, I would love to work with her again. Very talented, do these things, Now, the opposite, having someone that is incredibly talented, but has a problem or difficulty with his attitude around others, makes it very difficult for you to recommend the person, because you don't want negativity within a high pressure environment. You want to work with people that are your mates. You want to work with people that you can relate to, that you can hang out with, all of that stuff. I mean, a game takes 5 to 7 years to make. It's a long time for you to be around people, right? The same office, same place all the time. So it's definitely important for you to kind of like just like hunker down and be human with each other, and just like, even under pressure, you actually respect other people and have a crack under it. So you don't do something or say something you might regret in the future. Something that will actually make you grow as an animator as you become more experienced is this idea of learning more about what's going on in other disciplines. I found that very true. It depends on the studio, but some studios just basically keep you in the bubble, and animation, don't talk with others. So it can be a little bit stiff, but in most studios that I worked on, you can always kind of like talk with other departments in order for you to actually find out more, like maybe out of work hours, about what they do, and be curious about it and ask them, so sound, how do you guys do this thing? So cool. Code, how do you guys do this thing? It's so cool. And try to understand more about it, because only when you actually really understand and have a feeling for how a game is made, that's when you can actually kind of like see outside of animation, right? That's when you start to becoming more of that lead or director role, that you can actually make decisions but you're making the decisions based on other people's departments, right? So you don't think only about animation. Animation needs this. That's it. You're thinking about animation needs this, but design mentioned this. So now animation has to conform to what design said. And then what happens after animation? Sound, VFX, well, how does that affect them, right? So you need to actually go and talk to them and try to find out what's going on there. When you have a good idea of what goes on, it means that sound, VFX, design, all the other departments around you, especially as a director, they will be much more happy with you because you will have a good understanding of what they are trying to do, and you keep them in mind all the time. Means that they will always be informed and everybody's going to be happy, instead of not knowing enough and then people being mad at you because you took a decision that impacts a whole bunch of other people, but animation is cool, right? So this is why you have to learn more about other departments. And last but not least, I would like to say that politics in games are a true thing, a real thing for sure. So people don't like to talk about it, but there is quite a lot of politics in games, and it happens everywhere that you have an office full of people. Especially with the more people you have, the more politics there is. And it's going to be more and more visible to you and more important to you as you grow as an animator and then go up the ladder and become a leader and have responsibility. That's when you're going to start seeing some of these things. And unfortunately, as much as I would like to actually be in a company, doesn't matter what company, and just make games with no politics involved, unfortunately, there's always going to be some of that involved. And some people have agendas, and some agendas don't make sense to you because you just want to be creative. Now, if you are in a place like that, just keep in mind that the game is the most important thing that you are doing, right? It's all about making the game. This is what I think. So if people are talking about agendas or have a certain goal or whatever, just work hard, make good work, and the work would speak for itself. And then all this like rhetoric about like pointing fingers or doing certain things that doesn't really make sense and like seems to be a waste of time, those things will disappear. They will just be noise, because you're here to make a game. That is the most important thing that you can think of, right? Don't be distracted by some of this politics and some of these things. Just think about the game, think that you're making a game, be passionate about it, work really hard, make beautiful work, and then those things will just disappear. It will just be noise that eventually just dies down, because as long as you're doing a good job, no one can tell you that you have to change the way you are doing things, right? As long as you're pleasing people with your job, 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to continue with that job that you've made. And that's all I had for you guys. This is a bit of a chatty kind of video for all of you, and I know that GDC, it's all about showcasing like work and tips and getting some insider information. So I hope this inspires some of you or gives you guys a bit of knowledge of what goes on behind the scenes, because at the moment the game that I'm working on, very secretive. I hope to come back here and actually showcase some of the stuff that we've been working behind closed doors, but for now just wanted to showcase to you guys a little bit of what goes on in the games industry from my perspective after so many years, in the hopes that it resonates with some of you and helps some of you out there, because I know for sure that I would have loved to have this way back in the day when I started. Some of these topics that I mentioned in this video, I actually go through in detail in my YouTube channel. So if you guys are curious for more or want to know more about some of this stuff, feel free to head over to my channel, youtube.com/harveynewman, and check it out. And that's all I had for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as I say normally, stay well, stay safe. Peace.